So if human motivation was like a car engine, burnout would really just be an empty gas tank, you know?
Right, yeah, just a needle hitting zero.
Exactly. The engine sputters, and the mechanic just points and says, well, you need to pull over and refill the tank. It's a very straightforward, mechanical way of looking at how we function. You put fuel in, you get mileage out.
And we really gravitate toward that binary because, honestly, it's incredibly comforting.
Oh, for sure.
We prefer our internal problems to have these immediate, visible solutions. I mean, the idea of a quick mechanical fix means we can get right back on the road without having to, actually examine the engine itself.
But the human brain isn't a combustion engine. And when you step into the world of creative psychology, especially during major life transitions, that simple gas gauge theory just completely falls apart.
It really does.
We're suddenly navigating this emotional landscape that is incredibly murky. Just imagine you are sitting down at your desk, right? Your favorite notebook is open. Maybe your favorite educational audio is queued up.
Yeah, maybe even a highly technical C1 level podcast that you usually just devour.
Right, exactly. These are things you genuinely love. And yet, looking at them today, you feel absolutely nothing but this heavy, unsettling exhaustion. Like the very thought of engaging with your own interests feels like lifting a boulder.
Well, that specific paralysis is, it's the definition of diagnostic muddy waters.
Yeah?
You aren't just dealing with a lack of physical sleep here. You are experiencing a profound, structural, kind of internal fatigue that fundamentally alters how your brain processes reality.
And that is exactly what we are figuring out for you today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are exploring the hidden mechanics of a very specific phenomenon, that intense creative burnout that hits during milestone ages.
Specifically, that really chaotic transition of leaving your teens and entering your 20s.
Right. We're taking a profound look at the source material to understand why this happens, but we are also doing something entirely unique today.
Yes, we are.
We are arming you with the exact high-level vocabulary required to articulate this fatigue. Throughout this conversation, we are weaving in 22 advanced C1 level adverbs used in our source text.
Because, when you can precisely name the psychological weight you are carrying, it immediately loses a massive amount of its power to overwhelm you. Naming the mechanism is really the first step in dismantling the anxiety around it.
I love that. So to understand why this sudden wall hits you at 20, we have to look at the trigger.
Exactly. We have to examine a trigger our source identifies as the milestone mirror. Because turning 20 isn't merely flipping a page on a calendar.
Right. It's way bigger than that.
It's a psychological event that forces you to ruthlessly assess your entire life trajectory.
So let's talk about the mechanics of that assessment. Because the way we view time before that milestone is, well, it's fascinating.
It's completely different.
Yeah. When you're in your early teens, time feels like this vast, infinite resource. You look at a massive, complicated, goal-like mastering a new language or building a creative portfolio, and you genuinely believe you can conquer it efficiently.
You really do.
You think you can just organize your days, study hard, and arrive at the finish line without any wasted effort.
But that's the ultimate illusion of early youth. You feel entirely in control of your own pacing because, well, up until that point, society has essentially handed you a pre-written script.
Right. Graduate high school, pass these standardized exams.
Move seamlessly to the next grade.
Yeah.
Time feels infinite because the milestones are preset for you and they are relatively close together. The cognitive load of figuring out what to do next is entirely outsourced to the adults and institutions around you.
Which is a brilliant safety net until it suddenly just vanishes.
Right.
You hit 20, the calendar turns, and the script just runs out. Up until 19, you're practically penalized for going off script. And then suddenly you are penalized for not having written your own.
Precisely. Turning 20 is often the first moment that the safety net is completely gone. The timeline stretches out indefinitely into adulthood, and your brain suddenly recognizes the sheer, crushing responsibility of defining your own path.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
It is. You are no longer preparing for a test that someone else wrote. You have to invent the metrics for your own success.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. I get the psychological anxiety of that realization, sure, but I don't quite get the physical exhaustion part.
Okay, let's get into it.
Like, why does the simple act of turning 20 inevitably change our perception of time from an infinite resource to a ticking clock that breeds burnout? Why does it manifest so physically in the body?
Well, it really comes down to the metabolic cost of long-term decision-making.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, around age 20, the human brain is undergoing its final major phase of maturation, particularly in the prefrontal cortex. That is the area governing long-term planning, complex problem solving, and self-evaluation.
So it's basically the brain CEO.
Exactly. And when the societal script disappears, your prefrontal cortex goes into overdrive trying to map out a decades-long future from scratch. It is burning massive amounts of glucose to simulate potential futures.
Wow. Literally burning energy.
Right. And because of that immense energy drain, time stops feeling like a casual stroll and starts moving inexorably, like a massive glacier you couldn't stop even if you stood right in front of it.
So you look at your massive goals, your intense study schedules, and you realize that trying to push yourself relentlessly through this new, unmapped terrain is completely unsustainable.
You just can't do it.
You can't maintain that unyielding intensity when your brain is already working overtime just to build a roadmap.
And that energy drain fundamentally alters your emotional baseline. You look at your own passion projects, and paradoxically, you find them deeply irritating.
Oh man, yeah. The things you love start annoying you.
Exactly. The activities that used to give you energy are now demanding energy from a system that is already overdrawn. So the resulting internal fatigue compounds inevitably.
Because you're fighting your own biology at that point.
Right. It is bound to happen. And the most dangerous part is that it creeps in subtly. It doesn't announce itself with a loud crash. It drains your battery so quietly over months that you don't realize you're running on empty until you physically cannot get out of bed.
And like, as if that internal biological pressure wasn't enough, we immediately run face first into the modern external world.
Oh, yeah. The worst possible environment for it.
Exactly. The environment we live in acts as a massive accelerant to this developmental anxiety. We're trying to navigate this incredibly vulnerable transition in a culture that perpetually glorifies the hustle, demanding that you stay productive every waking second.
The modern ecosystem does not tolerate the messy, unmapped reality of a 20-year-old brain. It just demands constant visible proof of progress.
Everywhere you look online, you see other people's lives and creative outputs displayed impeccably.
Oh, flawlessly.
Every single post, every update, every career transition looks absolutely flawless. And you are sitting there with a prefrontal cortex that is desperately trying to figure out a basic life path surrounded by a digital environment of internal mess.
And you're comparing it to an algorithmic highlight reel.
Right. You start dragging yourself grudgingly to your desk, filled with resentment because you feel like you're the only one struggling.
And that comparison is where we begin to weaponize our own creativity. When you look at an impeccably curated feed, you are entirely focused on production.
The final result.
Right. You're looking at the final, polished, packaged result. But creativity itself is fundamentally not a polished process. It relies on chaos, dead ends, and a tremendous amount of failure.
Yeah.
When we conflate the chaos of creating with the polish of producing, we start imposing impossible standards on our private work.
Here's where it gets really interesting for you as a creator, though. The source material uses a brilliant metaphor here. It explicitly warns that tying your creativity to a rigid standard of constant, flawless output unquestionably kills the creative spark.
Unquestionably.
It turns your private art into a factory assembly line. You stop exploring and just start moving awkwardly and clumsily through routines that used to bring you joy, just to say you produced something that day. So isn't comparing our behind-the-scenes reality to someone else's highlight reel essentially demanding that our messy artist's studio operate like a perfectly sterile, flawless factory?
That's the perfect way to put it. A factory is engineered for one specific, purpose-predictable, uniform, high-volume output. There is zero room for anomaly or experimentation on an assembly line.
Right. If a machine does something weird, the line stops.
Exactly. It shuts down.
Yeah.
But the human mind, especially a creative or a learning mind, operates more like an artist's studio. It requires permission to make a mess.
Yeah.
It requires wasted paint, crumpled paper, and days where absolutely nothing usable is produced.
But wait, if you know you have concrete goals, like, say, we've tried to build a career in your early 20s or trying to pass competitive exams, you kind of have to operate like a factory, don't you? I mean, the world rewards predictable, high-volume output. How are you supposed to survive in a hustle culture without imposing those factory metrics on yourself? If you let your artist studio be messy and unproductive, don't you just fall behind?
You are identifying the central tension of modern early adulthood right there. The pressure to act like a factory is immense.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
But the biological reality is that when you impose the rigid metrics of an assembly line onto the complex heuristic studio of your mind, the brain eventually rebels. It refuses to work.
It just goes on strike.
Basically, yeah. It recognizes that you're demanding algorithmic predictability from a neurological system that requires diffuse freedom to function. The rebellion isn't a choice. It is a hardwired self-preservation mechanism.
And that hardwired rebellion doesn't just stop at your output. This is the part of the deep dive that completely shifted my perspective on burnout.
Oh, the input side.
Yes. We've established how forcing the factory model ruins your ability to create. But the text highlights this massive secondary casualty, how burnout destroys our ability to input. It completely shuts down our ability to consume information.
Because we culturally define burnout as writer's block or, a lack of motivation to work, we rarely talk about how it decimates our receptive capacities.
Right. You start actively hating the educational audio you usually love. Like you can't even stomach listening to a C1 level podcast that used to fascinate you.
Not at all.
Because your brain is profoundly exhausted. The fatigue has penetrated to the absolute core of your cognitive function. The source uses this incredible concept of the mental digestive system.
That's a great metaphor.
It is. You've been feeding your mind data, advanced vocabulary, career strategies, and complex goals for years, but you haven't given it space to process any of it sufficiently.
It is literal cognitive indigestion.
Wow, yeah.
I mean, if you sit at a table and continuously eat course after course without giving your body time to digest, you will eventually become physically ill, regardless of how highly nutritious the food is.
Your body will just reject it.
Exactly. Your digestive tract will simply stop accepting input. And the exact same biological principle applies to information processing.
And we live in an era of unprecedented access to that input. You can learn a new language, study coding, and listen to a lecture on advanced psychology, all on your commute to work.
You are constantly chewing, but never digesting.
Yes. So your brain violently pushes back. It vehemently rejects new information. It just screams for silence.
The brain's processing speed has not evolved to match the speed of the internet. It fundamentally requires periods of prolonged silence to consolidate memories, to build new neural pathways, and to transform raw data into actual usable understanding.
Without that silence, the data just sits there.
Right, rotting in the cognitive tract.
But our instinct when we feel that resistance is to just double down, isn't it?
Yeah.
We tell ourselves we just lack discipline. If I know I have a major writing test coming up and my brain is rejecting the study material, shouldn't you just push through it?
That's the standard advice, yeah.
Right. I'm going to force myself to sit in the chair and practice anyway. But the text points out that this brute force approach inadvertently leads to a state of total paralysis.
It does.
Why does forcing it inadvertently make the output suffer even more? You try to force a practice essay, and the resulting work manifestly fails your own standards. It's so obviously, undeniably bad that it shatters your confidence.
Well, it's because of the specific fuel source you are tapping into. When you force yourself to work through profound fatigue, you are relying entirely on the prefrontal cortex, the center of willpower and executive function.
Okay.
But willpower is a finite, highly depletable biological resource. When you are navigating the transition of your 20s, trying to invent a life script, and dealing with a flooded mental digestive system, that part of your brain is already running a massive deficit.
So you're demanding peak performance from a battery that is literally blinking red.
Exactly. You aren't drawing on deep inspiration or entering a flow state. You are wringing out a dry system. The brain actually perceives this forced cognitive effort as a literal threat to its survival.
Wow.
A threat.
Yes. It triggers a stress response, flooding your system with cortisol. And cortisol narrows your focus to deal with immediate danger, which actively inhibits your brain's ability to think laterally, connect abstract concepts, or absorb nuanced vocabulary.
So your brain is literally in fight or flight mode over an essay.
Right. Your output fails manifestly because you are asking a stressed, threatened biological system to perform delicate, high-level creative tasks. It is structurally incapable of doing so under the influence of that much cortisol.
So if forcing productivity actively damages the system, we have to find a different way out of the woods. And this is where the text offers this brilliant pivot. It completely reframes what this heavy exhaustion actually represents.
It really changes the whole paradigm. It stops treating burnout as a failure and provides a biological explanation for what the brain is actually trying to achieve.
We have to stop viewing this creative wall as a breakdown. It is a necessary, highly sophisticated structural intervention.
Hitting this wall at a milestone age is intrinsically part of human development. It's built into your very nature. The text explains that your brain is desperately trying to transition away from the frantic, scattered, trial-and-error energy of your teenage years.
It wants to build a mature, stable foundation for your 20s.
Right, and to accomplish that, it has to aggressively weed out the clutter in your mind.
In neuroscience, this is known as synaptic pruning. During our youth, our brains overproduce synaptic connections. We have an overabundance of neurological pathways because we are trying to learn about everything in our environment simultaneously.
We're basically just soaking everything up.
Exactly. Our energy is diffuse and scattered. But as we transition into adulthood, the brain realizes it cannot sustain that level of scattered energy. It needs to become efficient.
Makes sense.
So it begins pruning away the connections, habits, and thought patterns we no longer need in order to strengthen the deep foundational pathways that will support our adult lives.
Which takes a colossal amount of energy.
Whoa, an unbelievable amount. This neurological remodeling requires so much metabolic energy that your brain literally diverts power away from outward-facing tasks like creating art or studying for exams and focuses it entirely inward.
So you feel exhausted because your body is performing deep tissue cognitive surgery.
Precisely.
So what does this all mean for you? It sounds like the brain weeding out clutter is essentially like upgrading a smartphone's operating system.
That is the perfect modern equivalent.
Right, like it has to shut down completely and appear unproductive for a while to install a stronger, more mature foundation for your 20s.
Think about the mechanics of a major OS upgrade on a device. The system doesn't just keep running apps while it changes its fundamental architecture.
The screen goes completely black, a little progress bar appears. You can't open your messages, you can't make a call, you can't use the camera. The phone might even get physically hot in your hand because the processor is working so intensely on the internal code.
Exactly.
If you had never seen a phone update before, you would swear the device was totally broken.
And what happens if you panic and try to force a hard restart during that update?
You corrupt the entire hard drive. You've completely bricked the phone.
Exactly. The phone isn't broken. It is temporarily unavailable to the user because it is building a stronger, more advanced foundation.
Man, that makes so much sense.
When you hit a milestone age and experience this profound internal fatigue, your brain is executing that exact same protocol. It has to take you offline.
Right?
It shuts down your ability to produce the apps, your essays, your art, your rapid learning, so it can dedicate all of its processing power to upgrading your foundational operating system.
Which makes the solution provided by the source material so incredibly vital. You have to step away from the mirror. You have to stop measuring your worth by the apps you are running today.
You have to let the internal progress bar load.
Yes, the only way through this transition is to rest unequivocally. You have to step back with absolute certainty without any ambiguity or guilt.
Guilt is the enemy of the OS update. You have to recognize that human creativity and intellectual growth do not operate on a straight upward trending graph.
They operate in long, slow waves.
Right. There are seasons in your life where you will produce meticulously, where you have the energy to focus on the finest details and execute complex projects flawlessly. And then there are seasons where your only biological job is to simply exist, observe, and let the soil rest.
Accepting the dormant season is so difficult when you care deeply about your future. But the text offers such a comforting reality check if you are sitting there feeling angry about your own lack of motivation.
It really does.
It points out that your frustration is conspicuously a sign of caring. It's an incredibly obvious, glaring indicator that you are still deeply invested in your path. If you had truly given up, you wouldn't be frustrated at all. You would just be apathetic.
The engine hasn't died.
No, not at all.
The frustration is simply the friction between your old, adolescent expectations and your new, adult biological reality. It is proof that the desire to create and achieve is still very much alive within you.
You just have to stop revving the engine while the car is elevated in the garage for major repairs.
Exactly.
And the beautiful promise of this text is that once the OS update is complete, once the mental battery is genuinely recharged, that urge to create will remarkably return. It will come back in a way that feels almost miraculous, striking you out of nowhere when you least expect it.
But it will return with a different quality. The frantic, anxious energy of your teens will be replaced by a more grounded, deliberate focus. You will be operating on a mature system.
This entire deep dive is a reminder that your 20s are not a frantic race to a predetermined finish line. They are a complex laboratory for self-discovery, and walking through that laboratory is significantly easier when you have the right tools.
Emphatically.
Today, we unpack 22 advanced C1 level adverbs, words like inexorably, impeccably, manifestly, vehemently, unequivocally.
And by mastering that vocabulary, you are simultaneously mastering your own psychology. You are doing two vital things at once.
Right.
When you have the language to articulate that your sudden exhaustion is intrinsically tied to a developmental milestone, or that comparing your messy studio to an impeccably curated algorithmic feed is unconditionally damaging your mental health, you fundamentally change your relationship with burnout.
You stop being a passive victim of some vague, heavy tiredness.
And you become an active, informed participant in your own cognitive upgrade.
You learn to trust the silent periods. You learn to accept your biological need for deep rest, knowing that all the skills you've built, all the vocabulary you've learned, and all the hard work you put in previously hasn't disappeared.
It is just being optimized.
When the update finishes, the apps will come back online, and they will run smoother and faster than ever before. Thank you for joining us on this incredibly raw, honest deep dive into the realities of the milestone mirror. It takes courage to look closely at our own fatigue.
It takes immense courage to put down the societal script, and I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you navigate whatever transition you are currently facing.
Oh, let's hear it.
If hitting a creative wall at a milestone age is actually your brain temporarily shutting down to install a much stronger, more mature operating system, what happens if you stop viewing your periods of silence and low output as wasted time? What if those quiet, frustrating, unproductive months are actually the most vital, foundational, and unseen work you will do in your entire life?